Hey guys, okay, so we're going to start chapter 10. This is chapter 10, section 1 on page 596 of your textbook, and we are doing radicals and radical functions. So here's example 1. So we have square root of 36. So that one you should be able to do in your head, just 6, right? Square root of 36 is 6 because 6 squared is 36. How about the square root of 0? Just 0. How about this one where we're squaring 4 over 49? So you can actually rewrite this as the square root of 4 over the square root of 49 and then solve. The square root of 4 is what? 2. Square root of 49 is 7. So how about when you're squaring a decimal? It's still the same concept. What times what gives you 0.25? And that would be 0.5 because 0.5 squared gives you 0.25. All right, how about letter E here? The square root of x to the 6th. That is actually x cubed because to redo it, to show you why, we would do this. You would say x to the 3rd squared, and what does that give us? When we are taking an exponent to an exponent, we multiply here, right? So that would give us x to the 6th. So that's why the square root of x to the 6th is x to the 3rd. Okay, so let's come up here and look at letter F, which is 9x to the 12th. So we're going to kind of do the same concept as we did in E down here. Make sure all this is showing up. Okay, so the first thing we can do here is, what is the square root of 9? Well, that's 3. Now, what is the square root of x to the 12th? Okay, so we would have 3x. This is the answer here, 3x, because if you were to square it, what would happen when you squared that? We would have 9, and we would have x to the 12th. All right, look here at G. G is the negative square root of 81. The negative sign is not here under your square root house. So this is just negative 9 because it's separate. Square root of 81 is 9. Put the negative sign in front of it. Where H is a little bit different because we do have the negative sign here underneath. So that is not a real number. You can't take the square root of a negative. Not a real number. Okay, so let's now do some example problems. All right, I want you to try these example problems. Hopefully I didn't move the board too much. There we go. Okay, we have square root of 49 and square root of 0 over 1. The square root is over the whole thing, sorry. There we go. The square root of 16, same thing here, I'm not drawing it big enough. 16 over 81. The square root of 0.64. Square root of z to the 8th. Square root of 16b to the 4th. The negative square root of 36. And the negative, or the square root of negative 36. Okay, press pause and solve these real quick, please. All right, so on this one here, you should have gotten 7. Here, 0 over 1 is 0, so the square root of 0 is just 0. All right, up here we have the square root of 16 over 81. So that can be written as the square root of 16 over the square root of 81, which would be 4 over 9. Okay, Moving on, we have the square root of 0.64. What times what gives, or what times itself gives you 0.64? So that would be 0.8. 0.8 times 0.8 would give you, or 0.8 squared will give you 0.64. Moving on, square root of z to the 8th is going to be z to the 4th, because if you square this, you will get z to the 8th. Okay, so the answer is z to the 4th. Okay. Next we have the square root of 16b to the 4th. Okay, square root of 16 is 4. Square root of b to the 4th is b squared. And again, same concept, because if you were to do this in reverse and you were to square this, how you get from here to there would be to square it. So 4 squared would be 16, b squared to the 2nd would be b 4th. Okay? Next we have the negative square root of 36. Take your square root of 36, which is 6, add your negative sign. And the last one, we have the negative square root of 36, which is not a real number. Not a real number. Okay, great job. Let's move on to example 2. Okay. All right, example 2. Super easy. We're going to take some numbers that aren't perfect squares and put them in your calculator. So grab your calculator. If you do not have a graphing calculator at home or a calculator that does square root, you can use your phone. If you don't have a phone that does that, you can look up calculator on Google and use that calculator. Okay, so if you did the square root of 20, you would know that it would be a number between 4 and 5, right? Because the square root of 4 is 16 and the square root of 5 is 25. So it's going to fall somewhere pretty close to being in the middle of that. So if you type that in on your calculator, you're going to get about, this is how you write about 4.472. Round to 3 decimal places. Remember to look at your last decimal place, the one right after your 4th decimal place, and you're going to either round up or round down, depending on what it is. Okay, so we're not going to do practice 2, because I think you can probably just type that in your calculator. I just wanted to go over it real quick. All right, moving on. Okay, example 3, now we're going to do cube roots. So the cube root of 1, what would the cube root of 1 be? 1 times 1 times 1 gives you just 1, so the cube root of 1 is 1. All right, how about the cube root of negative 64? Now here's the difference. When we're taking the square root of something, you can't have a negative sign here under your square root. But if you're taking the cube root, you can. If whatever root you're taking is an odd number, you can have a negative sign under here. So what is the cube root of 64? Well, we have 4 times 4 times 4, which gives you what? 64. However, we need this to end up negative. So we're going to say negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. So negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16 times negative 4 is 64. So our answer is negative 4. Okay, let's look at the next one. We have the cube root of 8 over 125. So this is similar to doing the square root where you had fractions, where we said cube root of, or square root of whatever was on top over square root of whatever was on bottom. We're going to do the same concept here. So what's the cube root of 8? 2 times 2 times 2. Okay. What's the cube root of 125? 5 times 5 times 5. So your answer is 2/5. All right, next we have the cube root of x to the 6th. So we need something times something times something to give us x to the 6th. So a way to do this, all right, we're going to have something here. What's going to be here? But we're going to take it to the 3rd. And remember, you multiply exponents. So what times this will give you 6? 2. So there you have your answer there. X squared is your answer. All right. Next example, we have the cube root of negative 27 x to the 15th, okay? We're gonna use the same basic strategy we did for taking the square root of a large number here. So first we said, what is the cube root of this part? What times what times what is going to give you negative 27? And it's taking the cube root, so we can have a negative under here. So 3 times 3 times 3 gives us 9 times 3, positive 27, but we need to end up with the negative sign. So negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3, okay? How about this one? We need to multiply x. We'll have an exponent of something here, taken to the 3rd, and we need this value to get us to 15. So that's going to be x to the 5th. So your answer is going to be negative 3x to the 5th. Okay? Okay, so let's try some practice problems now. All right. How about we do cube root of negative 1, cube root of 27, cube root of, that's a bad 3, cube root of 27 over 64, cube root of x to the 12th, and cube root of negative 8 x to the 3rd. Okay, press pause and solve these, please. All right, so for our first one here, your answer, you should have gotten negative 1, because negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 will put you back here. Cube root of negative 1. Okay, how about this one? Did we all get 3? 3 times 3 times 3, 27. How about cube root of 27 over 64? Remember, take your cube root of the top and your cube root of, can't talk today, cube root of the bottom. So on the top, we just did this one up here. Cube root of 27 is 3. How about of 64? We did that one in a problem back, right? 4. 4 times 4 times 4. Okay. All right, let's take a look at this one. Remember, draw it out. X times what? Here's your missing box to the 3rd. What goes in this box? What times 3 will get you to 12? And that is 4. So your answer is x to the 4th. All right, how about the last one here? Same thing, do each part separately. You're looking for a cube root of negative 8, which will be negative 2. And now we need to do this part. Let me come down here to do it. What goes here in the box? 3 times something will give us 3. So that's a 1. So it's just negative 2x for your answer. Okay, moving on. Okay, example 4, we're going to do different roots. So let's try some different expressions. All right, let's try this one here. How would you solve this? What times, we need something times itself 4 times to get to 81. Okay, let's try 3. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, times 3 is 81. So your answer is going to be 3. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do when you look at this one is, you notice we have a negative under here. Before you say it's not a real number, come over here. If your root is an odd number, then the negative is okay, and there will be a solution to it, okay? So let's see what we have here. We have to have something 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Something times itself 5 times to get us negative 243, and we know it's going to be a negative number. So negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9 times negative 3. Negative 27 times negative 3 is positive 81 times negative 3 will give you negative 243. Okay, you can also put these in on your calculator and you should get this same answer. How about this? The negative square root of 25. All right, here the negative sign is not underneath your square root, so your answer is negative 5, because the square root of 25 is 5. Put your negative out front. Okay, how about this one? Okay, we have a negative here. The first thing you do is look over here at what you are taking the root of, and it's 4, so it's an even number, so you cannot have a negative under here with an even number, so this is not a real number. All right, okay, one more example. I have no room. Let me erase this. Okay, let's do cube root of 64 x to the 3rd. Okay, break it apart. What is our cube root of 64? What times what times what gives us 64? We've done that on 2 or 3 other examples, so we know it's 4. 4 times 4 is 16, times 4 is 64. Okay, how about this part right here? What do we do there? Okay, so we're going to break this part apart, and we're going to say x to the what will give us the cube. So let's work backwards. 3 times what will give us 3? That's 1. So it's just x. 4x is your answer here. Okay, now let's try to simplify the examples on practice 4. So I'm going to put them up here. You give it a try. All right, press pause and give these a try. Okay, let's look at the first one. We are looking for the fourth root of 10,000. So something times itself, we're going to do this 4 times. Let's try 10. 10 times 10 is 100, times 10 is 1,000, times 10 is 10,000. So your answer there is 10. How about this one here? Oh, we have a negative, so first thing you do is check your root, and it's odd, so we're okay. So your answer is going to be -1. How about this one? Our negative sign is not here under our square root, so we're okay. So we're just going to solve this, which is 9. Put your negative out front. All right, let's look at this one here. What's our root? It's 4. And we have a negative sign underneath with an even root. So this is not a real number. Okay, how about this one? Break them apart, do each part separately. What's the cube root of 27? That's 3. How about the cube root of 9? You come down here. Okay, so we're going to go in reverse. 3 times what? What goes in the box to get you 9? And that is 3. So 3x to the third is your answer there. All right, let's move on. Okay, so the next part, example 5. All right, how about some like this? Make sure we're still in the board. There we go. We're gonna have the square root of -3 squared. Square root of x squared. Fourth root of x minus 2 to the fourth. Cube root of -5 to the third. Okay, let's do those 3 and then I'll erase them and put the next 3 up. Okay, so if we have the square root of -3 squared, what happens when you square -3? You get +9, and the square root of +9 is 3, right? But would you get the same answer if this was a positive number? You would. It would be the same answer. So what we end up here is the absolute value of 3. Well, the absolute value of 3 is just 3. So your answer is technically just 3 when you solve it. But it is important to note that you are taking the absolute value of it, because you can actually have 3 or -3 under here and get the same answer. Okay, let's look at x squared. We don't know if this is positive or negative, so your answer is just absolute value of x, because your answer could be positive or negative depending, and since it's a variable, we don't know, so just absolute value of x. Okay, on C, we're taking the fourth root of x minus 2 to the fourth. So these are just going to cancel out, and we're just going to be left with the absolute value of x minus 2. Again, because we don't know if this value is positive or negative, and this is an even root, so it could be either one. All right, our next example is -5, the cube root of -5 to the third. Okay, so here, if you take -5 to the third, you get -125. Then if you take the cube root of that, what do you get? You end up with -5. And it's not an absolute value, because if this was a +5, your answer would be +5. You're actually able to solve this one. Okay? Let me erase these and put up the next 3. Okay. All right, so let's do this one up here first. Okay, again, we have an odd root here. So whatever we're multiplying, whatever we are taking to the 5th, it's going to have a different value if it's positive or negative. It's not like it's an even value. So if we have 2 negatives, we're not multiplying them together to get a positive. Because this is an odd root, it's going to be whatever the answer is, no matter what. So your answer is just 2x minus 7. No absolute value, because it's not either positive or negative. The answer can't be both. It's just one. So whenever you have an odd root, there's no absolute value needed. This is just what your answer is. Okay, how about this one? All right, so we're going to, because it's 25x squared, and this is an even root here, we are going to do this separately. So the square root of 25 is what? That is 5. Okay, now we have this x squared to deal with. Well, this could be a positive number or it could be a negative number, and we don't have a way of knowing. So it's going to be 5 times the absolute value of x, where x could be positive or negative, and you would still come out with the same answer. Okay, on our last one here, before we do this, we have to actually factor it. Okay, so we have x, and again, factoring review, multiply to get 1, add to get 2, everything's positive. So we're going to have x plus 1. Simplify that. We get the square root of x plus 1 squared. So, since this is an even root that we're working with here, this could be a positive number or a negative number. So your answer is the absolute value of x plus 1. Okay, so I want you guys to try these next examples. Okay, let's see. Put this one down here. Okay. 40. Okay, press pause and give these a try, please. Okay, for this first one, -4 squared. Well, -4 in parentheses, so we're talking about this whole number here, squared is going to be 16. and the square root of 16 is 4. No absolute value sign is needed because this -4 here is put in parentheses. So we know our answer is not going to be positive or negative. This is just our answer here. All right, the next one we have the square root of x to the 14th. Okay, split it up. X to the what? And let's work it in reverse. 2 times what is going to give us x to the 14th? My box is really small. And that's 7. So your answer is x to the 7th. Okay, let's go on to the next one. The 4th root of x plus 7 taken to the 4th. Okay, so we don't know the value here, and this is an even root. We have a variable here, so we don't know the value. So your answer is going to be the absolute value of x plus 7. Okay, move down here. Here we have -7 cubed taken to the cube root. All right? So if we solve for this, -7 cubed will give us a negative number. Then we take the cube root and we're left with -7. So that is just your answer there. All right, how about this one up here? Well, looking at this, we have an odd root here. So whatever's in here, if it's negative, we're going to have a negative answer. If it's positive, we're going to have a positive answer. It can't be both. So your answer is just going to be 3x minus 5. No absolute value signs needed because you have an odd root. How about this one? Okay, approach each section separately. Here we have 7 and the square root of x squared is just x, so 7x. Now, let's look at it again. Could this be a positive or a negative number? It could be both. We don't know which one it's going to be, so you need to add those absolute value signs around there. Okay, this one down here, you need to factor first. All right, what adds to get 16? Multiplies to get 64, and everything's positive. Well, that's going to be 8. Okay, so now we're going to have the square root of x plus 8 squared. And it is a positive root, and we don't know if this value is going to be positive or negative, so we have the absolute value of x plus 8. Okay? All right, last set of examples, and then you are finished. Okay. Let's see here. All right, so if you look on, now we're on page 600 in example 6, so we're going to do some functions here. And it says if f of x equals the square root of x minus 4, and g of x is going to equal the cube root, I should have left more space, of x plus 2. Okay. So our first one says f of 8. What is f of 8? If f of x equals x minus 4. Okay, so plug it in. So we have the square root of 8 minus 4, which is what? Square root of 4, which is 2. Okay, our next one is f of 6. All right, so we have the square root of 6 minus 4, which is the square root of 2. So that's all. You don't have to plug this in your calculator and get a decimal. You're good. And it doesn't simplify anymore, so you can stop there. Next we have g of -1. So if this x is -1, let's plug it in. So we have the cube root of -1 plus 2. What is -1 plus 2? So we have the cube root of 1, which is just 1. All right, Last one, we have g of 1. All right, so we have the cube root of 1 plus 2, which is the cube root of 3. And that's as simplified as it is, so you can just leave it like that. All right. Try this last set of examples, and that wraps it up for this section. Okay. All right, if f of x equals the square root of x plus 5, and g of x equals the cube root of x minus 3. Okay, so our first one is f of 11, then we have f of negative 1, g of 11, and g of negative 6. All right, press pause and solve, please. Okay, on our first one, if it's 11, then we have the square root of 11 plus 5, plus 5, which is 16. Square root of 16 is 4. How about the second one? We have the square root of negative 1 plus 5, which is the square root of 4, which is 2. How about this one, g of 11? We have the cube root of 11 minus 3, which is the cube root of 8, which is 2. Last one, we have the cube root of negative 1 minus 3. So that is the cube root of negative 4. Oh, that's a 6. Sorry. Negative 6, that makes more sense now, minus 3. So we have the cube root of negative 9, and that's as far as it goes. So there's your answer. It doesn't simplify any more than that. All right, I will post the assignment. Have a great week.